Halloween is right around the corner. That got me thinking about some really scary stuff like anooptophobia, pistanthrophobia, atelophobia, and several other hard-to-pronounce phobias. Hey, this is Todd. Welcome to the scary Welcome to the scary edition of the Thrive Singles podcast. Whether you're single again or still single, stop hating being single and learn to thrive. And welcome to the scary sciencey words I don't know how to pronounce edition of the Thrive Singles podcast. Seriously, I couldn't find a good pronunciation help with these phobias. So I'm pretty scared I'm going to butcher these words pretty badly, but in the face of this fear, boldly, I press on. Yeah, it's getting close to Halloween, so I figured fear would be a good topic for this week. You know, when I was faced with the thought of divorce, that was pretty scary. The only thing scarier than that was the thought that after the divorce, I'd be single, in my 40s. That was terrifying. Turns out psychologists have a scientific term for the fear of being single. Anooptophobia. I find that fear is closely related to several other fears for which I recently took the time to look up the medical names. But let's start with that one. Anooptophobia. The fear of being or staying single. Kind of like the word asexual is, meaning without a sexual nature. Anooptophobia is the fear of being without a wedding, a nuptial, so to speak. Yes, this is an actual psychological term, and yes, I think I had a mild case of it at the time of my divorce. And from my interaction with long-term singles and people in the process of divorcing, I'd say it's pretty common. So if you have a fear of remaining single the rest of your life, you've got lots of company. If this is your fear, face it. Face it head on. Maybe you'll end up married, maybe you won't. Who knows what the future holds? Either way, you can thrive. In fact, you need to thrive first. Fear makes you timid, insecure, and unsure of yourself, and that's the exact opposite of the confidence it takes to be attractive and desirable to the people around you. I have to mention gamophobia here too, because gamophobia is one of the easiest phobias to pronounce, and it's also a very common fear among singles. It's the fear of marriage or a fear of commitment. I did a whole podcast episode centered around that fear, so I'm not going to go into depth about it here, but please go back and listen to that episode. It's pretty good. The interesting thing is that, as afraid as some people are of being single, they still choose to remain single because of their fear of making a lifetime commitment. So fear gets them one way, then gets them the other way too. Next, I want to talk about autophobia. And no, that's not a fear of driving, riding in, or being run over by an automobile. It's a fear of being alone. Also called monophobia, mono as in one, singular, or isolophobia, like isolated. I have to confess, as much as I value my alone time, there were times as a single person when my fears got the best of me. I let my mind wander onto things like, what would happen if something bad happened to me while I was in my apartment? I was alone there most of the time. Who would know if something bad happened to me? I could go for days without help. Or in a worst case scenario, without anyone discovering my dead, decomposing body. So, if this is one of your fears, first of all, realize that you're not alone in your fear of being alone. It's not uncommon. Secondly, try to understand your fear. Is it like mine, a fear based more on the logistics of living alone? If that's the case, you can put systems in place that put your mind at ease. Or is it more of fear of being alone with your thoughts? In that case, spend some time and effort reprogramming your thoughts. A good mental and spiritual diet of positive thoughts, prayer, and encouraging scriptures would make a good place to start. If you're seriously afraid of being alone, to the point where you constantly, consciously avoid it, consider some professional help. Cognitive behavioral therapy could be just the thing to help you overcome that. Another fear many singles face is the fear of not being good enough. There's a scientific name for this, atelophobia. Here's the thing about that. Have you ever heard of a bell curve? A bell curve is what happens when you plot out almost any distribution of values, frequencies, or probabilities. There's going to be outliers on each end of the graph, but the majority of your results will pile up somewhere in the middle. It'll kind of look like a bell with flattened out ends and a hump in the middle. And my point is that by whatever metric you measure yourself, you're going to end up somewhere in the middle of that bell curve. Maybe the upper middle, maybe the lower middle, but somewhere in the middle. You're probably not the ugliest, the dumbest, or the least likable person on the planet, or even in your local area. I mean, look around you. There are people less attractive than you, with less education than you, with less common sense than you, making less money than you, who are and will remain happily married. You're probably not that rare exception out on the fringe bottom tip of the bell curve who is unlovable and unmarriable. Okay, moving on. Do you have a fear of trusting people due to bad experiences with prior lovers? Pistanthrophobia is the fear of trusting people due to bad experiences with prior lovers. This is another fear I've spoken about before, so I'm not going to go into depth right here. Check out my podcast titled, How Can I Trust Again After My Heart's Been Broken? For now, I'll just say that based on your life experiences, you probably have legitimate reasons to fear trusting anybody again. But that fear can and has to be overcome if you desire a happy, intimate, fulfilling marriage. The last fear I want to talk about today is the fear of rejection. In psychology, this is referred to as, the fear of rejection. I was kind of disappointed. I had a good phobia motif going here, but I couldn't find a fancy scientific word for this one, so it just is what it is. It's the fear of being rejected. Truth is, every time you reach out to anybody, there's a possibility you'll be rejected. There's always a chance that the person you're interested in won't have any interest in you. C'est la vie. Seriously, that's just the way life is. There's no reward without risk. This is true in financial matters, true in sports, true in business, and definitely true in love. And when I say there's a chance they won't be interested in you, you know what else that means? That means there's a chance they will be interested in you. But you'll never know if they're interested in you or if they're not unless you take the risk and go talk to them. There's an old school sales philosophy that says you need to get out and get rejected a few times to get over it. After a while, you realize that every no gets you closer to the next yes. That method was endorsed by probably the greatest salesman of all time, Zig Ziglar. So there just might be something to it. The bottom line is, fear is the enemy. It stops you from fully living and enjoying your life as a single person. It's to be eradicated and given no quarter. How do you do that? I know this is old news and you've probably heard it a million times, especially if you were raised in a Christian home like I was, but it bears repeating. Over 360 times, the Bible tells us to fear not. One way to overcome your fears is to embrace the things the Bible teaches about peace, faith, love, and fear. Another great tool for conquering fear is cognitive behavioral therapy. Like I mentioned earlier, if your fears are interfering with your daily life, getting some professional help is a great idea. And cognitive behavioral therapy is one of the best tools in a counselor's toolbox. Understand that living your life completely avoiding your fears, it's just not possible. It's untenable in the long term. Sooner or later, you'll have to face the thing you're afraid of. Why not face it sooner in a smaller way and on your own terms? For instance, if your issue is trust somebody with something small or even something insignificant. Just see how it goes. And if that goes okay, build on that and maybe trust them or somebody else with something slightly more important. Work your way up from there. You can't jump directly from I can't trust anybody to hey, let's get married. There's going to be in fact, many interim steps to get to that level of trust. I know that's how it was for me. Let me share a quote with you by Nelson Mandela. Mr. Mandela said, "I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear." Nelson Mandela. I can tell you from experience that everyone I know feels fear at times. The successful people I know are not those who never feel fear. They're the ones who step out anyway and do things even though they feel afraid. This might seem like a trivial example to you, but it feels pretty significant to me. I've been playing musical instruments and singing in front of people, mostly in churches, since I was about 11 or 12 years old. But even now, after 40 some odd years of doing this, there are still times I get nervous right before I step on stage. But because making music is important to me, I've never let that stop me from playing or singing. I like what Franklin Delano Roosevelt said about it. And his quote starts kind of like Mr. Mandela's did. Courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the assessment that something else is more important than fear. So, till next time, don't let your fear rob you of the life you desire. Don't let your fear of being alone or your fear of being single long term rob you of enjoying your life as a single person. Don't let your fear of rejection or your fear of not being good enough rob you of the experience of connecting with the quality people around you. And for God's sake, don't let your fear of trusting again or your fear of commitment rob you of the chance of experiencing a lifetime of fulfilling, intimate, committed love. So fear not, and as always, till next time, thrive on. I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. See you next week. Till then, be sure to subscribe and go check out my extensive archive of past posts at thrivesingles.com. And thrive on.
Whoa, thrive. Yeah, come alive. There's more to life. You gotta grow, you gotta thrive. Whoa, whoa, you gotta thrive. There's more to life than to just survive. You gotta grow, you gotta thrive.